All right. Well, Nicole, welcome to the Pistachio Podcast. This is the grand finale of season one, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So, Nicole, why don't we start by just telling our audience and our community what you do?
What do I do? It's a long answer. I will try to keep it brief. I'm a nonprofit communications consultant. I currently work in India, but I'm physically in Seattle right now thanks to the coronavirus. I'm here during the school holidays also with my kids because my husband's job moved us to India and we come back to Seattle, which is our home base when the kids are not in school. So what I do is I'm a nonprofit communications consultant. I'm currently working at Ashoka University's Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy, which is a research and convening center related to growing Indian philanthropy and NGOs and social enterprises.
Mhm.
On the side, I have a website called trailingspouse.com, and there's a hyphen, trailing-spouse.com. It's part of the design, so you should check it out. It's kind of fun. And what that is an online magazine that celebrates the grit and creativity of trailing spouses everywhere, whether they're moving domestically, moving internationally, military, academia, expats, immigrants, all of the above, men, women. And
That's
I'm also and I'm
wonderful.
and I'm also a mom, and I'm very busy.
Okay. Yes, and I can imagine we are, recording this episode right in the middle of this global pandemic. So I can only imagine your situation where you're now in Seattle and working in India. And you spoke about, of course, your main day job, which is working with Ashoka, and then also about what you do with trailingspouse.com, which I definitely want to dive deeper into. But at the heart of it, I wanted to know that you are also a relocating spouse yourself. You mentioned about moving to India for your husband's job. So, uh, tell us a little bit about your relocation journey. Was this move to India your first one, or have you been an expert at this? Just walk us through your personal relocation journey.
This is my first international move, but I have moved for my husband's career before. We had moved from the Northeast when he was in business school in the Bay Area. We moved to Palo Alto for a couple of years, and then we moved back to New York, which was my hometown. And then when 2008 happened, with all of that economic situation, we ended up needing to move for his job to Seattle, which was a
Mhm.
very big move for us. At the time, I was pregnant and
Wow.
I didn't know anybody really in Seattle. I was doing pretty well as a journalist in New York, and my specialties were covering religion and
Mhm.
covering breaking news
Wow.
for newspapers. And I also had an adjunct professorship at Columbia's journalism school, which is my alma mater. So then you move me from New York to Seattle 6 months pregnant.
Wow.
The other daily newspaper in Seattle, other than the Seattle Times, was the PI, and that had just folded. So you had all of these unemployed journalists with local contacts looking for work ahead of me in line, and there wasn't much work. And I was visibly pregnant.
Mhm.
So it was really, really tough. And then, of course, my specialties being religion reporting, which is not that interesting on a national or international scale in the Northwest. It's not like we've got a lot of headquarters of religious groups here and a ton of religious diversity the way you would in New York City or other major metropolises. And breaking news, hard to do when you have a baby because you don't know what your schedule is going to be and you have to have
Yeah.
childcare. And I didn't have any grandparents around or anything like that. And my husband's job was very new, so he didn't really get to take much time off either. So I had to
Mhm.
find something new to do. And it was a very hard transition. And then compared to that, going to India now this past year was completely the opposite. It was pretty easy. And I laugh because the expectation is always that an international move is going to be so much harder. And it just
Right.
depends on other things in your life, where you are in your career, what your resources are, how the timing is. It's not just the destination, it's also the timing and the resources. Um,
Ab-
but but I also, sorry, I'm just gonna wrap it up that I also have a lot of role models in my family and my husband's family because my mother and my husband's mother had immigrated to America after they got married. My grandmother on my mother's side had lived all over Cyprus, which is a small island, but back then in the olden days, moving 30 miles was like moving hours and hours away.
Right.
And then my great grandmother on my father's side had immigrated to America as well. So I'm a fourth generation, at least, trailing spouse. And I feel like it gives me perspective because I can at least Skype and WhatsApp and FaceTime and all that stuff with people back home, and I can work remotely now. None of those people had any of those options.
Absolutely. There's so many wonderful things you said there. I mean, obviously the first one being, I love that you're a fourth generation trailing spouse, which means you had wonderful role models in your family to look up to. And then, of course, you spoke about how no move is the same. So your move from the East Coast to the West Coast and then to India, they were so incredibly different. And you also spoke about how you moved at a very vulnerable time in your life and life stage that you were at and faced some struggles. We always like to say that relocation is an adventure filled with highs and lows. Is there a particular low moment that you remember? And then, of course, a high moment that you would like to share.
They kind of go together, don't they? Let me
Yeah.
think. The low would probably have been in Seattle about a year after we moved here, because I think there usually is a honeymoon period and a bit of adrenaline that happens. And although it was not ideal to be pregnant, when you have a baby, you do meet a lot of people because there's
Mhm.
play groups and gymborees and things like that. So I was making friends, I was meeting people. I'm pretty extroverted. That wasn't so much the challenge, but the career situation was really bad, and I felt after about a year I was really ready to get back to work, and
Mhm.
work was not ready to have me back, not in Seattle. And I was
Mhm.
really frustrated because I kept feeling like I have gone backwards, and my husband's career was going really well at that point, and it's kind of just a reminder that mine is not going
Mhm.
so well. But I
Right.
feel bad. I feel guilty, begrudging, and it's also just feeling like I don't know what to do next, because I didn't really know how long we would be in Seattle. For the first few years, it kind of felt like it might be temporary, so I didn't invest that heavily in networking those first few years. And I just hit a wall about a year and a half to 2 years after we had moved here, when I realized, oh, we're actually here for a while. I
Mhm.
should probably be doing something to pivot, to transition better, and figure out that I had to emotionally invest in my new location as well. So that was rough, and I had to just get some more mentors and career coaching and really rethink what I wanted to do long term, because journalism was not going to happen for
Mhm.
me in Seattle, just because of my specialties and the way the field is here, the competition at the time. So I ended up having to just think, well, what do I really like to do? I did more volunteering. And luckily, Seattle does have a very robust nonprofit sector,
Mhm.
thanks to the Gates Foundation in part, because we do have the world's biggest philanthropy here, and that seeds a lot of the energy. So I did a lot more volunteering, and then I found that my journalism skills were helpful for communications for the nonprofits I was volunteering with. And then I got a certificate from UW. They had a It's really helpful, I think, for any relocating spouse to look into
Mhm.
the community colleges or the state
Yeah.
colleges or the community centers. Whatever you can do to get some sort of local credential will help
Mhm.
you immensely with networking. And especially
Mhm.
in Seattle, that UW, I have Ivy League degrees.
Yeah.
UW is so much more important. I mean, any local school is more important than those fancy degrees from the Ivy League. So they really opened the door for me once I had that. It was just 15 Saturdays. It was a course in nonprofit management. And after I got that, then I was really able to hit the ground running with the nonprofit communications work that I was doing. And things got much better after that.
Great. Yeah. I can, I certainly identify with so many aspects of your story. I mean, you started off by talking about how you hit this wall and, you're thinking about what next, and it's almost like the door's closing on you. And there's this roller coaster of emotions of guilt and, the husband getting ahead in the career. And like you said, you're moving backwards. And I love what you said about, you hit this wall and then you moved forward. You got mentors, career coach, and you upskilled yourself really. What was one thing that kind of helped you move forward? Like you hit this wall, you're obviously like struggling what to do, and then you are moving forward. But was there something that kind of propelled you? Was there something that you did which really helped you?
I don't think it was any one particular thing. I think it was just a lot of little things.
Mm,
Meeting more people, realizing that what I was doing wasn't working, and just trying new things, needing to keep my mind sharp.
mm,
So I was doing things also, like I took a Spanish class and looking into what kind of hobbies I could pursue. I mean, just trying to,
yeah.
once I had the baby and he was a little bit more of an age where I could leave him with a sitter and a little bit more confidently, then I suddenly had more freedom. But it was a question of, what do I do with the time, and
Mm-hmm.
what do I do that will have a long-term benefit, not just
Mm-hmm.
kind of biding my time. But if I'm going to be now in Seattle for at least another 5 years, what does it make sense to do?
Mm,
So I did see a career coach. I also saw, there was a counselor that I saw a couple of times also, just to deal with some of the emotions, which was
mm,
helpful at the time, just to have somebody to talk to and not be just venting all the time to my friends, just have sort of a more objective person. And I thought that was helpful at the time.
absolutely. Yeah, that's such a great point. I think just taking care of our mental well-being and, not just relying on friends or family, but going to an expert and, leaning on that as an additional area of support is really wonderful. And also, what I'm hearing you say is, you really moved forward. You looked at the future and what I can do, and that kept you moving and allowed you to really pivot into this new career that you still continue now, right? You're still in that space.
Mhm.
Um, Wonderful. I want to shift gears now to trailingspouse.com. You spoke a little bit about it in your intro. I love the combination of the words you use to describe it, creativity and grit. So tell us a little bit more about, your reason for starting that, and what's your vision for Trailing Spouse?
I think part of it was the fact that it didn't already exist and I wanted to read it, because whenever I would look for role models and mentors, especially during those low periods, if you Google trailing spouse, you'll either find personal blogs, like travel blogs from people about their expat adventures somewhere, or you'll find these woe is me articles in the Wall Street Journal, et cetera, about how it's just such a career ender. It's especially affecting women. And it was more discouraging, and I just wanted to celebrate. And whenever I would see a story in a movie or in a biography I was reading about somebody, and I realized, oh, they had been a trailing spouse, I said, well, wait a second, we should be talking more about this. They overcame this, and actually not only did they overcome it, they became more successful because of it. So people like Julia Child, when I read the book and saw
Yeah.
the movie Julia and Julia, I was like, oh my God, she became Julia Child, the famous chef, teaching everyone how to master the art of French cooking because she was
Yeah.
a trailing spouse in France. They said if she had never been a trailing spouse, this would have never happened. And
Hmm.
if you watch the any of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg movies,
Hmm.
same thing. She ended up having
Yeah.
to follow her husband to New York and leave Harvard, and that could
Hmm.
have been the end of her career, really. And it wasn't. It was only the beginning. So I
Hmm.
felt like I wanted to celebrate these stories, and I wanted to read about them. And I knew a lot of people in my own network who had been trailing spouses, whether they've immigrated to Seattle from other countries or domestically like me. And then when I moved to India last year, I
Hmm.
was thrown into this really diverse network of
Right.
husbands and wives. And I thought, wow, everybody has such a great story. I want to read these stories. Why doesn't this exist? And I thought, well, I can make it exist. That's fine. And I ended up doing that.
That's wonderful, to just see this gap and see that it exists and then just do it yourself. And, these stories definitely need to be celebrated. And I love that comment. I mean, when I saw that movie of Julia Child, I was blown away. I mean, even when you were speaking about it right now, I had goosebumps. Or even we've spoken about reading Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and she's the most high profile relocating spouse, right? Just by relocating to the White House. So Love the idea of sharing and celebrating these women and men and their stories. Is there a particular story or two that you featured that has really like stuck to you or inspired you that you want to share without picking favorites, of course?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know. I would rather everybody else go to trailingspouse.com and pick your favorites. I really like the diversity of them. I'm trying to actively encourage more diversity, but now that the site's been up for about 6 months, we are getting more unsolicited pitches as well. And I really want to get some more husbands, and I want to get some more. We have one military family now, and we have one trailing kid who was in a military family. I'd love to get some more military families. I'd love to get more academia. There's a lot of material to mine from the faculty spouses. Those are a lot of challenges, and sometimes there's support and sometimes there's not, and it depends on the field that you're in. So I want to learn more about that myself.
Absolutely. So if you're listening and you want to share your story, go to trailingspouse.com and you can, write to Nicole, and we would love to, I'm sure she would love to hear from you. And so there's something interesting I read on your website, and you spoke to it, you alluded to it a little earlier about, it's not just the destination, but it's the timing and resources. And I read on your website that, consider the Gupte scale. So tell us a little about that. It sounds so intriguing.
I thought it would be fun to have some sort of unifying way to score all these moves, because my site was trying to bring together all these very different kinds of relocations. And I just came up with the Gupte scale. I stuck my name on it. Why not? It doesn't, I Googled it first to make sure it didn't refer to anything pornographic. It was fine. But I thought my experience had been that the domestic move was much harder than the international move. And I figured there are really three components to any move. There's a destination, which is on a scale of 1 to 5. How much do you really want to live in this place? Has it been on your bucket list? Is it a wonderful place to live, to raise a family, depending on your situation? Then there's the timing. Is this a good time for you to move in your career, in your life? And how long you'll be there? And then the resources, that kind of refers to how much support you have financially for the move, whether you have resources available while you're there, whether you have resources, there's some human resource element to it too, whether you have support there. So my move to Seattle from New York, I rated a 6 out of 15, because each of those is 5 points. It's quite low. And then the move to Delhi, I rated a 13, which is very high. I think that might be the highest on the website right now. And I have everybody do their ratings for their different moves that they talk about. And it does tend to be around, like, I would say most of them tend to be between 8 and 12. Mm-hmm. And it's just how you feel at first. Obviously, a lot of people might change after they get somewhere and they get the lay of the land. If somebody's feeling negative at first, then there's really nowhere to go but up. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you feel very positive, and then you've kind of set yourself up for disappointment when the honeymoon period goes. But hopefully everybody is like the We Are Pistachio community and open, happy, nutty, global. What was the fifth one?
Open, happy, nutty, global, tough.
Tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that idea of, looking at that move as in a holistic way, is it the right timing, the destination, resources, and completely intrigued by the fact that, your domestic move was way lower than the international one. It sounds so counterintuitive, but it just goes to make that point, no move is the same. And we're all, it's a matter of so many different variables. So I love that your stories are highlighting those different aspects, because as a relocating spouse, I need to see those ideals and know that, hey, not every move is going to be the same. If this was smooth, maybe this is going to be even smoother, or it might be even difficult.
Yeah, it depends where you're at. It depends on all those three factors, because you could move to I don't know, in my case, I guess moving back to New York City would be what had been my goal at one point, because that's my hometown. I really love it there. But if I were to move there right now, I would be miserable, because there's coronavirus and everything's
Yeah.
shut down. And I also have
Yeah.
2 kids who wouldn't be happy to live in a small apartment the way we would probably be living if we lived in a city. So
Yeah.
it really does depend on where you are in life. And a 10-year difference for me was also really part of it between the
Yeah.
Seattle move and the Delhi move.
Absolutely. So, obviously you've had a long relocation journey, and recently at We Are Pistachio, we started a series of blogs called Notes to by Relocating Self, where we ask relocating spouses to write themselves a note of, to the past versions of themselves who are just about to embark on relocation. Like, what did you wish you would have known, or what did you wish you could tell yourself then? So, if you had to write a note to your relocating self, what would you say?
Well, the move to Delhi is still pretty fresh.
Yeah.
So I don't have the benefits so much of hindsight there. I might just tell myself to expect the unexpected and just
Yeah.
embrace it,
Yeah.
embrace the craziness, because there was a lot of drama in the fall. And then I thought January, everything had quieted down, and then the coronavirus happened. So,
Yeah.
wow, it's been a very eventful year. I think for the move to Seattle, I might just tell myself not not think of it as temporary.
Mm.
If I had committed to it, I think from an earlier stage, it just, things seemed so uncertain back then, and we thought maybe we were only going to be there for a year or two. And if I had really embraced this idea of like, no, this is my new home,
Hmm.
I think that would have been better at an earlier point in the move.
Hmm. Yeah. So more of acceptance earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, love that. And I love the other two also is expect the unexpected and embrace it, you know. Uh, Great advice certainly, which I think is valid even today. If somebody out there right now is listening to the podcast and is relocating, I think this is great advice even for them as we go through this period. So you referred to our pistachio values, and so obviously like a pistachio who we are named after, it's obviously open with a part shell, globally enjoyed, happy, it's known in China as the happy nut, tough, and of course nutty, because I always like to say, like we say, who moves to a new place where you don't know anyone without a job or a support system? So if I were to ask you, and we ask this to all our podcast guests, if you have to pick one which of these five which you like or identify with, which one would it be and why?
I do feel like I have a bit of all of them. If I had to just pick one, I would say global,
Hmm.
which at first might seem like a cop out, but I'll explain a little bit more. So global, because right now I do have 2 homes. I have
Yeah.
Delhi and I have Seattle. Half my stuff is in Delhi right now, so I
Wow.
really feel global. And I also have a lot of globalness in my family. So I have actually work permits and citizenships for different countries too,
Wow.
which is a benefit. So when I moved, one of the things that made my move to India easier is that through my husband, who is of Indian origin, he's born in America, but his parents were born in India.
Hmm.
We have OCI status, which is Overseas Citizen of India.
Hmm.
And by getting that, it's like I'm a citizen who's able to work. And that was a huge benefit, which most expat spouses don't have. So I felt really lucky. And that makes me very global, because that means that I add that on my resume. I really like to, if I can offer anything to the community, I'll say I'm very good at resume presentations and editing. So I always make sure on my resume it has all my work permit authorizations, all the languages I can work in, and all that. So that's my global pistachio aspect.
Love it. And I think it is truly global. I mean, having two homes and also you're living in the US currently, and your job is in India. So
Yes, it's not ideal. So the time difference, for those of you who don't know, it's almost exactly opposite. It's 12 and a half hours. So just reverse the PM and the AM and add 30 minutes to go to India. So I'm always keeping these weird hours right now, and I'm almost living in like 6-hour cycles. It's like having a baby again in a way. And
oh my
but
gosh.
I feel bad about the situation right now, because everybody in India is also stuck in their home. So my own
Yeah.
office, my own colleagues, they're not at the office either. and they're not in necessarily the best places to work themselves. Their internet's very spotty for some of them. So I feel lucky on that sense to be where I am. Even though I've got the time difference is a problem, I do have really good internet and we can go outside here more easily.
Yeah.
But I did miss out on some travel that we had been planning to do because we were supposed to come back to Seattle for the summer vacation for the kids, but we were supposed to first go to Cyprus and visit my family, my mom's
Okay.
family. My grandmother's 103,
Wow.
and she kind of just lives to see me and the grandchildren, and it's really sad that we did a video chat with her today, and she can't really, I mean, she can kind of
Right.
see us and talk to us, but it's just really not the same at that age. So I do feel this global connection right now where I'm constantly reading all of these online news stories and the different newspapers that you can now find online
Yeah.
from different countries. And I'm trying to keep track of, wait, what's the rule for Cyprus now? Can I get to Cyprus on the way back to
Oh,
India and visit
yeah.
my grandmother or not? Probably not, because they have a 2-week quarantine there too. So I would have to go to Cyprus for over 2 weeks because I'd have to get out of quarantine first. And then going to India, we'll have to do a 2-week quarantine as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I know. I
Yeah.
think the pandemic has been hard on families. I think just having this whole global aspect, right? When you have family members all over the world, just coming to terms with the fact that we don't know when we will see them next,
Yeah.
is something that not everybody is talking about as much. And I think as relocating spouses, because we are global, we have family members elsewhere, and
Yeah.
it's so important to just recognize that. And I hope you get to see your grandmother very, very soon.
Yeah.
I'm sure it must be hard on her as well as you and the kids. I think,
Well, yeah, it really is. And I feel like I should also say we're lucky. I know a lot of
yeah.
people who are separated from their spouses right now.
Hmm.
And I was separated from my husband for a few months. He's here now just for a brief work visit, so at least we get to see him. But
Yeah.
he's gonna have to head back to India next week. And I have a good friend in India whose wife and son are in Chicago, and he hasn't seen them since January, and he was supposed to be with them all summer, and it's not possible now. He's not able to travel because of
Yeah.
the restrictions. So there's a lot of people all over the world right now who are
Mhm.
separated from their loved ones.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we can only hope and pray that things keep getting better, and that I think also that all of us stay tough and resilient, like you said, show that grit to
Yeah.
move. That relocating spouses so have to move through this period. So we've reached almost to the end. We have a couple of questions left, and we always like to end with a little rapid fire. So I'm going to say a word, and then you have to say the first couple of things, a word or a sentence that comes to your mind. So I know it's a little scary. I know I went through rapid fire on a podcast and I totally froze. um,
I'll try not to overthink it or underthink it.
yeah, so just few 5 simple words. Are you ready to start?
Yes.
All right, so first word is home.
Everywhere.
Okay. Relocation.
Hard.
Hmm. Food.
Comfort.
Love it. India.
Spicy.
Ooh. And trailing spouse.
Visit.
Visit. Love it. Thank you. You did so great.
Oh,
Love
thank you.
loved loved the repartee, like you had it all there. So we've almost at the end, and I could listen to your journey, and I think there's so much I could talk to you about. um, but I wanted to end with asking you, to our listeners are relocating spouses at different stages in their relocation. um, any final thoughts or any advice that you want to share to someone who is either thinking of embarking on this adventure, or is in the middle of it, or is maybe considering another relocation? What would you say to them?
I think I'll build on what I said earlier, where I'm encouraged by the fact that it's easier now than it has probably ever been. You can still work, especially now because of the virus. A lot of jobs will let you work remotely, and that opens up so many career opportunities for keeping your same job if you have to move, or finding another one that will let you work from wherever you are now. So that's really exciting professionally. I think just people being more transient in general and seeing more trailing husbands, it has made the visibility of this community so much higher. And a lot of companies that weren't so helpful with relocating spouses have kind of had to be now, which is great. And I think they realize that if they want to recruit top talent, they have to also provide that support for the family as well, and not just assume that, particularly if it's the wife, that she's just going to want to sit at home and make pies barefoot. I don't know. That was one of the jokes when we moved to Seattle. There was one day when I was making a pie barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, and my husband just burst out laughing when he saw me. But it was summer, I was barefoot, I was pregnant, and I wanted some pie, and so I made.
Yeah. Love that story. But yeah, really appreciate what you said. It is now easier than ever. And then there's so much that we have to access. There is trailingspouse.com, which is celebrating so many stories. There's We Are Pistachio, which is a community which is, helping you to relocating spouses to reach out to each other. So love that aspect of it's easier now than ever. And there's lots of resources out there.
Yeah.
Well,
You don't have to be the Jhumpa Lahiri novel character crying in the bathroom.
yes, you don't, certainly. And even if you are crying, you've got trailing spouse stories to inspire you, and the Pistachio Promise, which is no relocating spouses ever alone. So I love that our journeys intersected, Nicole. I think We Are Pistachio started about 6, 7 months ago, and so did Trailing Spouse. And we've been so excited to collaborate with you and share each other's stories. And I can't thank you enough for coming on this podcast and sharing snippets of your journey. And it was certainly inspiring the way you navigated two or very different moves, and you created a legacy of stories that you're going to leave behind for so many people to be inspired. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And if anybody wants to email me or visit the website, just remember there's a hyphen between trailing and spouse. It's the towing line for the hanging on and flying high adventurers. So the email address is hello@trailing-spouse.com, and the website is trailing-spouse.com. We also have a Facebook page you can find, and I'm sure that we'll link to each other a lot more in the future too.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Nicole, again.
Thank you for having me.